This is sort of a different position for me to be in front of the cameras. Usually I'm behind them, but I just want to say that Channel 28 has been a great TV station for my family, and my children have learned to read and write and count at a very young age watching Channel 28. I've been watching it since it started years ago, and I like KCET.
KCET Los Angeles, community television of Southern California.
In our profession, you know, we just have to be realistic about it. If you have to be in this miserable business, the place to be is Washington. This is where it's at.
At the White House, President Gerald Ford, who last October became the first man to be nominated for vice president under provisions of the 25th Amendment, is about to name his choice to succeed him in that post. It will take place in the Oval Room of the White House. Unlike the ceremony for Mr. Ford's announcement, that was in the East Room, a much roomier setting for the ceremony.
He owns Come back. I want your driver's license, agency card. Okay.
Assembled are the leaders of Congress of both parties. They met with Mr. Ford earlier this morning, about an hour and a half ago, and have been in the White House ever since, presumably to help keep the name from leaking out. The president himself is in a private study off the Oval Office, and he's expected to enter in a few moments with his vice presidential designee.
Friend, baby. All right, kid. I'm lining up behind you here. I just try to get inside after next 2 days. Be careful, guys. Reflections any better there? Right. Let me get up to the window, too. You're getting the TV White House correspondent on his way to the White House press room.
Do you want the full report from inside the Oval Office now or later?
Now. You saw the remark. You saw and heard the remarks on television, so we needn't go over them. It's my judgment that as the president talked, Rockefeller was shaking. He seemed to be slightly moving back and forth, and I thought his knees were a little bit weak. By and large, he only smiled, very small smiles twice. He seemed, his head was stationary, and he was looking right at the president's left chin.
What is that?
Hey, who was the undersecretary?
Rockefeller appears, by the way, when you see the two of them together, to be about 2 inches shorter than the president.
Larry, did the new vice president refer to the notes that he brought out with him?
No, he made no reference to the notes. Mrs. Kissinger was outside in response to a question in a pink blouse and a white pantsuit, but she was not in the room.
He's smoking a cigarette.
She didn't have room.
When you consider the responsibility that you have covering the presidential beat, it's a rather awesome task.
I'm just convinced that it's a very serious business that we're involved in, a cooperative business, to get across to the American people the information they need to know in order to be enlightened voters and enlightened citizens.
9-year-old Patty Albers of Phoenix, Maryland, got the VIP treatment from President Ford today. She told her older sister she wanted to visit the White House. Instead of the usual tour, however, Patty found herself designated the 1,000,000th visitor to the Executive Mansion in 1974 and ushered to the Rose Garden for pictures. The president and reporters asked them how they liked the special treatment, and the young girls shyly ducked their heads and giggled.
You want to run the country from there sometime?
Yeah. You want to be president?
That's good.
What's the last name again?
I think we ought to get to them. Albers.
I think we get a kind of a monarchical aspect to the presidency that's unfortunate. An awful lot of phony human interest stuff and a lot of embellishment of the presidency that I don't think serves the country well.
We are inclined in this country to give far too much attention to the president and his family like they were gods and kings, and I don't like that. So I made up my mind this year. It may be a wrong thing. I may not like it, but I'm changing my style of curving the president. I'm just going to try to see what's going on behind all this, what's really happening at the White House. I'm going to try to take the issues and really dig and do a more thorough job of reporting and cut out this silly sauce.
A very simple enlistment form will appear in many of tomorrow's newspapers along with a symbol of this new mobilization, which I'm wearing on my lapel. It bears the single word win. I think that tells it all. I will call upon every American to join in this massive mobilization and stick with it until we do win as a nation and as a people.
But there must be a tax.
But this tax bill, bringing it out of the Ways and Means Committee at this late date, well, they won't do that, will they?
He knows that, and that's why when he calls for that, it's simply window dressing on the president's part, in my opinion.
Well, I just don't think energy conservation alone is going to do the job. I don't think you can conserve 6 million barrels a day. I think you have to find alternate sources.
You can get some beautiful, specific quotes here. This is a great place to get them. This is more. You get more information here in the House of Representatives than any place in the whole country. A lot more you do at the White House. Listen, Donna, we're at Senator Byrd's office, and we got to do something with him now. And then I'm going to go upstairs and work a while, and then I'm going to a reception at Sheridan Park tonight for some of these Republican gals. And I'd rather imagine Ford might show up. I don't know. Ford? Oh, God help us. That was tomorrow, Wednesday? 2:30 tomorrow. That'll be a treat. Do we get to sit down? What? And ask follow-up questions. Great, terrific. Great. Ford's going to have a press conference at 2:30 tomorrow afternoon in the Rose Garden, and we reporters get to ask follow-up questions. One. Hello. Hi, Phil. How you doing? Glad to see you.
Hope you'll indulge my tardiness.
Oh, we're delighted. We don't mind a bit. We were
going here.
using the time, and it's nice to see you.
Always good to see you.
Well, thank you very much. She's going to have a nice office.
Gene Gibbons is at the scene. Thank you very much. Signing off for now, this is Pi Chamberlain in Washington. I'm a radio reporter, and let's face it, nobody knows a radio reporter. They might recognize my name, but a radio reporter is by no means a celebrity and hasn't been since TV came into being. And yet, I feel that I get the same consideration from Byrd that he would give to Peter Lisagor, who's a big shot, you know.
Good morning.
Peter's way above me in the pecking order, although I must say I reach a lot more people than you do, Peter. Take that. But a lot more, maybe 10, 15, 20 times more. That's all right.
How you doing? Are you sure it's coming on?
What?
Is Ford coming on having a press conference?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We'll see you inside. We saved a seat for you.
Very good. Thanks, Al.
Okay. Can we get in?
I'll be in just a second.
Okay.
If you wish, if you have one, you can ask a follow-up question on the same subject. I think we're going to try this today and see how it works. I think probably in fairness, it wouldn't be right to your colleagues to ask like a four-part question and then a four-part follow-up question, obviously.
And here we are.
What do you plan to ask him this afternoon?
I never tell people ahead of time what I'm going to ask about. Tell us. Oh, yeah. I'm hoping to ask him a question about 1 million jobs to be opened up by immigration if they send the illegal aliens home. That's what I want to ask him about.
Well, I'd like to talk about the gasoline taxes, gasoline rationing, you know, this apocalyptic vision he gave of the world if we don't lick inflation, but there wasn't much mandatory in that program. And
Peter, you don't have your win button on.
no, I don't. I forgot my win button.
No one has on win buttons today.
No, I didn't.
You can't mobilize this group.
They're very much like a bunch of reindeer. There's some natural leaders, and they pretty much spell out what is news from a White House standpoint, I think, other than the really crisis stuff.
Can you give an example of that?
Oh, an example of that is John Osborne, who is a columnist for the New Republic. John gets on to an idea. He begins to see somebody emerging as influential in the White House, and so he does a piece on that fellow in his little magazine that has a very limited circulation. And within 2 weeks, you begin to see this popping up in the major newspapers and byline stories by people out of Washington bureaus.
One of my colleagues, you ought to see what he's got. Oh, here, I'll show it to you. He's got a great, he signed, John Osborne signed the win coupon in the paper, and he added that he would enlist as an inflation fighter, an energy saver. And then he added, I am especially interested in saving my own energy. I will retire and do absolutely nothing if you will grant me a pension of $20,000 a year.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Won't you sit down, please? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. One of the first responses to our WIN program yesterday was John Osborne's signing up. And I have his application right here. Thank you, John. Well, the first question, Dick Lerner.
Mr. President, a few things were left unsaid in your economic address yesterday.
And I, therefore, don't think we should speculate about something that I don't think will take place.
Yes.
Some people think, a great many people, in fact, think that your proposals were not tough enough, or at least tough on the wrong people.
In view of your somewhat apocalyptic vision of what will happen to this country if we don't lick inflation, why didn't you propose mandatory gasoline taxes or gasoline rationing in order to conserve fuel, for example?
We believe that the surtax charges that we have recommended are a more equitable approach to the achievement of greater income, so we could give some relief to the less well-off, the people who have suffered who are suffering greater hardship.
Yes. If the purpose is to conserve fuel because oil being such a large factor in inflation, why not gasoline rationing now?
We believe that the American people will respond to our volunteer program. In my recommendations yesterday to the Congress, I said we would cut the foreign importation of fuel by 1 million barrels per day. Thank you very much. Do you like it here?
I guess I viewed his family.
How'd it go, sir?
It was a very good conference, I thought. Excellent.
You didn't get to ask a question?
No, I didn't, but that's all right. We had a good conference. We had plenty of good variety there, a lot of questions.
You didn't ask a question either, did you, Les?
I wasn't recognized, but I was amazed to get recognized the first time he ever had it. In fact, I was left almost speechless.
You could tell that the follow-ups take longer and there'll be fewer questions asked, but that's all right. I'm glad to have the follow-ups. I thought it was a great idea.
I think it's a great system. I wish that we just stopped this jumping up and shouting. As I didn't shout, and I didn't hear you for a change.
I did shout. I tried to get in. I was going to try. I
think we ought to have an agreement that nobody shouts, because I think it makes them look like Francis of Assisi with the wolves.
Confidence that the voluntary measures he urged for conserving fuel would work.
Oh, I just pick up the scraps from Lissago. We all know that. I wouldn't make a move without consulting him. Right?
A bank of about 66 lights at one point. What the hell did they need lights for?
I asked Tom to care about it. He says the cutout. He said otherwise there would be shadows, half moon.
Oh, apparently there were lights up on the roof of the White House in order to cut out the shadows that came from the hot sun. White House officials may attribute that to a White House official. But reporters remarked on the curiousness of an energy-saving president with a bank of 66 lights, hot lights on, and 8 others on another section. Okay? That's it. Oh, thank you. Okay, fine. All right, good. I'll be in about a half hour, 45 minutes. Bye.
The logistics of it all often make it impossible for you to really stop and think about what you're saying and what you're doing. And so there's always the fear that you're going to mess up, that you're going to maybe not interpret it the way it should be, or not report it exactly the way it was. And I think that's fine. That's fine. As long as reporters have that fear and that concern, then they're watching themselves, and all you can say is they're doing their best.
The White House assignment is not the best assignment in town. Again, the White House press corps has become the pampered part of the Washington press. I wouldn't send my best man to the White House. Now you'll say, why do I go there?
Yeah, why do you go there?
I'm a bureau chief. We got a small bureau. The president has been the focal point of the news in Washington for a long time. But I only go to those briefings. I don't live there.
Yeah.
And then in the morning I do other things, and in the afternoon I do other things, and I don't go to the White House. But as far as sitting a man at that White House 8 hours a day, I would send a competent guy, but I wouldn't send my best guy, because it's a waste of my best guy's time.
There has to be a commitment on the part of the...
Very function in the Watergate business.
Those were not White House correspondents.
I know that.
And I think that may prove the point that a Washington bureau has to be fairly deep to do a job of coverage. In other words, just having a White House correspondent wouldn't do it. He's so busy taking trips with the president and just trying to cover the day-to-day handouts and releases and that kind of stuff that he's saturated. He doesn't have time to do investigative reporting, and he really needs backup.
I thought we had 3 minutes.
Doc, Pete Lissagar, I've got the statement. Has he started talking yet? Yeah, well, let me give it to you because he doesn't get down to the meat of it until a little later. And I'll give it to you in rather clean form, I think, but you'll have to doctor it, and you've got some time, I take it.
The subcommittee will be in order. Subcommittee on Criminal Justice of the House Committee on the Judiciary today welcomes the President of the United States, Gerald R. Ford.
He noted that, that the task undertaken by the committee was made easier
by the personal friendship and common background we share in the Congress. But to faithfully perform our respective tasks, we must, insofar as possible, lay aside personal relationships and considerations. We are not here because of friendship,
but because of the responsibility our governmental system of checks and balances and separation of powers places upon us.
We meet here today to review the facts and the circumstances that were the basis for my pardon of former President Nixon on September 8, 1974.
When you're working with a small bureau, you've got to cover the thing this way and then get back in there and get the atmosphere and the mood in that room.
I want very much to have those facts and those circumstances known. The American people want to know them, and members of Congress also want to know them.
I want to go in and catch some of this, because the early part of it is Ford explaining, as he did in his pardon statement, why he did it, you know, to compose national passions and so on.
In the previous 8 months, I had repeatedly stated my opinion that the President would not be found guilty of any impeachable offense. For that reason, I remained firm in my answers to press questions during that trip and repeated my belief in the President's innocence of an impeachable offense.
Quite damaging stuff here. Zoc, just for your information, you might want to move this up in the lead, because Ford continued to really lie here about this matter, because he knew on August 1st that there was this damaging information, you see. And this is a piece of history that we haven't had before, because Ford was saying up until Monday, August 5th, that Nixon was innocent. I just interpolate that for you. Right. I think every reporter that works in this town that's been here for a while has a small measure of influence, because he can choose to report some things and get them out. As Howard said earlier, get it out into the public dialogue. To that extent, I have some influence.
Yeah. Gentlemen, can you all hear me? Can I remind you about sitting up straight, Carl? So we got some good shots, so you look pretty. Thank you very much. We're about ready to go. Okay, somebody got me a slate.
Tommy, can you help the shading on 3 at the top?
Projection, I'm about ready to go on a ground scheme company. You got some slides for me?
The pardon of Mr. Nixon created such a reaction, such a spasm in this country, and so many doubts really about the president himself, that is President Ford, that it is his judgment and sense of loyalty to Mr. Nixon that is brought into question by this action.
You want to.
There is the disquieting aspect.
May I make two observations on
Two shot. Hugh and
one of them
Peter
is
on
just
one.
simply...
You to go first because...
Maybe you could go first if you don't mind. We've got to do a
She wants us on the same...
Well, I've been in this town almost 25 years. It was like 250 years though. And it's been exciting. I suppose I could go back to City Hall somewhere, but I'd find it's like the old war correspondents, you know, when they had to come back to rewrite desk, you know. They get so bored, once in a while they open up a drawer to read about their stories from the war, you know.
Oh, work is the most fascinating thing in the world. There's no point, you know, it's not any fun to take a vacation. That's boring and dull. Work is the most fascinating thing, and I do it all the time, 7 days a week, 19 hours a day. And I really mean that. And it's really dull not to be working. I'm never going to retire.
Be sure to see Part 4 of Gerald Fords America, The Hill, Congress Behind the Scenes.
I told the people out home all the time, I just tell them, look, I'm not running on what we call what did I used to say about the purity ticket. I've never been one. I'm just your senator. And I said, the other guy may be on the purity ticket. I don't know, but I'm not. Because I have not been that pure. Yeah. But I can deliver. And I can produce. And I'm not your preacher. You go over to your church. He'll take care of your sins over there. I'm your senator. And I'm not your doctor. I'm not going to tell you about that. Go over and see him. But I'm your senator. And I'm not your evangelist here, but I'm your senator. That's why I tried. I'm just laying right on the line. Yeah. So before we ever start, I admit that I've had lots of sin.
Yeah.
And then I said, all those that have had some join me. You'd be surprised when they all come down to the rail. Be surprised how many folks join that. We're live. Take care.
They show on TV after the...
Larry, how did the other guests react when Rockefeller came in?
The president and Rockefeller came in together, and the other guests clapped and smiled.
Seemed happy about the whole thing.
Yeah, they seemed very pleased about the whole thing. Yeah. Now, I don't know if you saw it on television, but after the two people finished their remarks, they kind of split, and Rockefeller went down the line. First, he shook hands with all the congressional leaders, and then he went over and shook hands with the cabinet side people. We couldn't hear any of it, but it just looked like small talk. Some people were saying, congratulations, Nelson, that kind of thing. Or a lot of them call him governor. I'd say probably most of them call him governor here. We think we overheard, and I advise caution on this, one conversation between the president and Secretary of Defense Schlesinger. Wasn't Schlesinger who said, we're checking on amnesty. It's a good... Saxby, sorry, yes, Saxby. We're checking
a few more minutes left.
And then we heard him say, a good idea. And he said, Saxby said, we're checking on amnesty, good idea. Said to the president.
Oh, I could not hear the first part of the president's response, but I think I heard him say at the end something to the effect, don't get run out of town. So one has to assume that he said, I hope I don't get run out of town, but that's not a direct quote.
I think that's all. I am.
Yeah.
Thank you.